About vegetarianism, he spoke something. He said, whether it is animal matter or vegetable matter is not the concern, but the taste to kill and eat should go from you. That is his statement. That means even from the plant, you can eat without killing the plant, and even from the animal, you can eat without killing the animal. For example, the milk and the milk product and the leaves of trees, and he prohibited the use of roots because you are killing and eating. And he permitted his disciples to use honey, but he said, don't kill the honeycomb. I think they were having a method to extract honey without harming the honeycomb. We don't know what happened about it. And about plants and animals, he expressed a sentiment. Nature accepts if you eat a plant. It never accepts if you eat an animal. Because nature has created plants and animals in such a way that if you cut a part of a plant, it will sprout once again. If you cut any part of an animal, it will never sprout. He said this is a language of nature. The very fact that plant once again sprouts if you cut a part of it means you can cut a part of a plant and eat it without killing it. Whereas you have no right to cut any part of an animal because there is no possibility of its getting the organ once again. This is what he expressed about plants and animals. Strangely, the same sentiment is expressed in the ancient scriptures when they were commenting about the creation of animals and plants and human beings. Whether we accept the theories of Pythagoras or reject, we can't deny what he says, and we have nothing to say against his logic of it. Another sentence he spoke was, don't allow sparrows to come and go into your house. You know, sparrow is a little bird. His disciples asked him why. He said, because there is no continuity in the movement of the sparrow. It was a symbolic saying. That means many wonderful thoughts will be coming to the mind and going as a proof of our wonderful intelligence. Don't allow such wonderful thoughts to come and go. Let there be a continuity of thought and a continuity of purpose. If you allow little thoughts to come and go, you are not fit to have a meditative mood and a direction to live and a purpose of life. That is what he means. And in short, we can say that the wavering of the mind should be controlled. That is what he means. Another statement, never offer your right hand to anyone. It is also a symbolical saying. That means on behalf of anyone, don't accept a responsibility. On your own responsibility, you can accept anything. But on behalf of anyone, you should not accept anything. Because more often you will be fooled. That is the truth of it. That's I explain. Yes, yes. Offering the left hand, not the right hand. Yes, yes. That is, suppose I want you to promise something to someone on my behalf. What is your position if you make a promise to someone on my behalf? You are on the street, naked. That is your position. So this is a very, very important statement. That is, on our own responsibility, we can accept anything with anyone. Even 10,000 francs you can give to somebody and forget about it. But don't promise even 100 francs because this fellow has promised to you. Suppose the fellow does not bring it in time. You will be the fool in the situation and not that fellow. That is what he means by this statement. Yes, I'll tell you. Suppose you promise to me something which somebody promised to you. Then if the other fellow deceives you, what is your position with me? For example, you can offer something in your house. You can invite me to your house and ask me to eat in your house. Or you can invite me to cook my food in your house. But what happens if you ask me to cook my food here? The fellow deceived you and you are the person exposed. That is what he means. That is, we can do anything to anyone. On behalf of any other person, don't do it. So, we should not stand answerable for anyone. That's what he means. Another statement, the moment you wake up from bed, you roll your bed and then come out. This is one of his statements. That means whenever we do something and when our purpose is served, we should not leave it then and there and create inconvenience to the people who come there after us. We should once again rearrange things and put them in order before we leave the place. Suppose we use this for our classroom and we go away. The people who come next, they have to rearrange these things before they can do what they want in the hall. So, in using houses or articles or instruments or anything, we have to observe this. When our purpose is served, we should have a ritualistic winding up of things, after which only we are privileged to leave the place and things to others. It's a matter of great responsibility. Another sentence, don't touch fire with a dagger. This is also a symbolical statement which is literally followed by some of his disciples. Now, if you go to a sect among the Tartars, they never touch fire with a sharp instrument. Ask them why. They say it is non-Pythagorean. Yes, yes. And some of the sects among American Indians called the Sioux families, they never touch fire with a sharp instrument. Ask them, the old fellow among them says, non-Pythagorean. But it is not what he meant. Fire means a fellow in an excited mood, irritated and angered mood. Say, don't rub him on the wrong side. Don't touch him with the wrong words or wrong statement. That is what he means. Because he can do any amount of harm immediately to you. If you use words or sentences like daggers, then the fire blasts you. That is what he means. Another sentence. Half something and you have created it. If you make anything into two halves, That means you know the secret of creation. This is a sentence which contains his teaching. See, in ritualistic schools, he used to give a sentence and then he asked the students to speak only half of it, and he spoke the other half, or he spoke the first half and he asked the student to speak the second half. That is what he called the secret of creation. That means there was only one fellow before creation, and when he has become two, there is the creator and the created, and this is what is called creation. And he expressed it like this: the creator and the created at right angles to each other, and the example is creation, which he called the hypotenuse. Yes, act of creation. Creator and the created, the act and the product also. Because yesterday we have seen that there is always +1 in the function of the numbers. For example, if you take 2 and 3, 2 into 2 is equal to 4, 3 into 3 is equal to 9, 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, 3 plus 3 is equal to 6. This is 13 and this is 13. Yes, 2. No, 2 plus 3 is equal to 5 into 5, 25. Here you have 25 plus 1. The sum of the squares on the other two sides and the sum of the numbers and its square, they have always 1 as the difference, and that 1 represents a new item or created entity. Yes, every aspect, yes, numbers and figures he used to transmit his teachings. And this last aspect, that is, you have it, anything, you know the secret of creation, is mechanically used in the ritualistic halls nowadays. For example, they give a catchword to be kept as a secret, and the student is asked to speak half of it, while the teacher speaks the other half, and they do not know why it is done like that. For example, the name of the pillar at the entrance of the temple is given secretly to the disciple, and then once again he was asked to utter it. Then he has to utter only half of it, while the teacher utters the other half. And if we ask the Freemasons why they do it, they have no explanation to offer, because they are as blind as anyone about the secrets which they carry on their head as headloads. Here is the reasoning in Pythagoras. First there was the one, that is what is called I am. And the one became two, that is the one became consciousness and two became power. So we have the primary unit of creation, including consciousness and power. So God descended
Donc Dieu est descendu
from the state of monad into a state of dyad. This is the language of Pythagoras. And in the scriptures, consciousness is called Purusha and power is called Prakriti or nature. So the All God has come down as consciousness and power. That is the first couple. and it is the cause of all creation. In the Tantras, the consciousness is called Shiva and Prakriti is called Shakti. The first is the male principle, the second is the female principle, which are wrongly understood as the male and the female by the beasts of sex. And the tantric literature is understood in beastly terms by these beasts of sex who commented it in their own way. It is passive and active principles that are called the feminine and masculine principles and not the male and female of it. So Pythagoras gave the oldest of all teachings, and we find the earliest of the teachings of all nations among his teachings. Though in the beginning there were no true disciples with him, for the simple reason they dreaded his discipline, gradually there were true disciples, quite a number of them. When he has grown old, they honored his principles and his law. For example, he established one wonderful principle. He said, 2 disciples of Pythagoras should place their monies commonly and use commonly. 100 families of Pythagoras, they should have common money and use it commonly. And literally they observed it. And there were wonderful instances of the wonderful noble behavior of his disciple. And one of his disciples fell ill on a journey, and he was seriously ill. He was taken by a businessman to a chowdhury, that is an inn, and he was placed there in charge of the owner of the inn, and medicine and caretaking and food were given to him, and money was spent for him, but he did not survive and he died there in the inn. But before death he said, I am a Pythagorean and take me near the wall. And he has written some script which was not understood by anyone. And he said, I am dying, and what is the amount of money you have spent for me? And they said, don't worry about it. He said, no, I belong to Pythagoras, and my father Pythagoras should not owe anything to anyone. So tell me how much I owe you. And he has given him the account of how much money was spent upon him. And he put some symbols on the wall, and he said, another Pythagorean, my brother, comes here and he will pay it off. When he pays, you please accept it. And then he died. And it was about 5 years later. A fellow who was living in that inn for one day, he looked at that wall and called the owner of the inn and asked him, did a Pythagorean die here? He said, yes. And have you spent so much of money for him? He said, yes. Now here is the money. Accept it. And my father Pythagoras now is beyond debt. And the fellow was stunned. He himself forgot about it, but he received the amount. This was the degree of brotherhood that was enjoyed by Pythagoreans. And even today, 2 real Pythagoreans enjoy the same brotherhood. But it is very, very difficult for a third person to recognize 2 Pythagoreans. They live with such a spirit of secrecy. But the wonderful thing about Pythagoreans till today is they can go to any country without any money and any preparation, and they can live a princely life without owing even a single franc to anyone. That is the wonderful arrangement made by Pythagoras and Pythagoreans, and it continues till today. We don't find a second example like this. So thank you all. No, that has a significance between the person and the Paris. It deals with the relationship of that person with Paris.